A tremendous response last night to the John Howard interview. Viewers writing to me, remembering the Howard line. Wasn't it a good line? One person, one vote, one law, one sovereignty, one goal, one hope. Well, in the 24 hours since then, things have changed. The truth has emerged. Under draft changes to the Labor Party's election platform, a Labor government will pursue a treaty with Indigenous Australians. Peter Dutton grilled the government yesterday in question time on whether the voice was the trigger for a treaty. An unpublished draft of Labor's platform says, and they've got their national conference in August, as I told you last night, the platform says, quote, Labor will take steps to implement all three elements of the Uluru Statement from the Heart in this term of government. Well, just today we learned that the Prime Minister's political interest in Indigenous Australia dates back to at least 1986. As a young activist, he signed an open letter calling for reparation, land rights and sovereignty to be granted to Aboriginal people in recognition of the effects of quote-unquote invasion. James Morrow, in fact, reminds us that the letter was published on April 18, 1986 and read in part, quote, we believe that the granting of land rights and appropriate compensation is of fundamental importance as we approach the bicentennial of the invasion of Aboriginal land. Anthony Albanese's words. The letter referred to, quote, the illegal invasion of Aboriginal land and called for, this is Albanese way back in the 80s, called for, quote, recognition of Aboriginal sovereignty, land rights and compensation for lands lost and for social and cultural disruption. So why are we surprised? Lydia Thorpe warned us that she wouldn't vote for the voice because she wanted a treaty and she wanted compensation. Remember, I raised this with John Howard last night. Here is part of that interview where the former Prime Minister delivers a clear and explicit demolition of the notion of a treaty. Listen to this. Well, he says, Prime Minister Albanese says the voice proposal is something that could fit onto, quote, his words, a single A4 page. But if I could go back to the deceit, it is deceitful, is it not, when in fact this Uluru Statement from the Heart is 25 pages and it calls for the voice to have offices, and I quote, on an appropriate site within the parliamentary circle in Canberra that would be, quote, supported by a sufficient and guaranteed budget with access to its own secretariat, experts and lawyers. I mean, John Howard, why do you think, to use your words, there is an unwillingness to roll up your sleeves and explain what is involved?
Well, Alan, it's as plain as the proverbial pikestaff that this government supports the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And that's got three components. It's got the voice, as yet to be explained. It's got treaty-making process, and I'll come back to that in a moment. And it's got truth-telling. Now, the idea that a sovereign nation makes a treaty with part of itself is preposterous. Treaties are made between sovereign states, nations. They're not made between a sovereign state and part of that nation. The Commonwealth of Australia came into being in 1901. It doesn't make treaties with the state of New South Wales. New South Wales' separate sovereignty disappeared, subject to the Constitution, in 1901. And the idea is preposterous that you make a treaty with part of yourself. And as for truth-telling, I don't quite know what that means, but...
No, nor do we, John. There, isn't he wonderful? Former Prime Minister, so articulate and eloquent. But there is another unarguable reason why in this referendum you vote no. On the one hand, we've got a race-based change to the Constitution. One group of Australians elevated above others. And then, as John Howard has said, the preposterous notion